If you're prepared with those 5 questions going into every sales conversation with your leadership team, you're going to be so much ahead of most people, because most of those topics end up being lecture topics or wasted time or whatever. So we start preparing these guys ahead of time on what to do, so that when they show up, Jared's term, my term, they're at least as good as Susie sorority and Frankie fraternity, half as entitled, twice as trained, more dedicated and ready to go and hit the ground running. Because that discipline that they set is what's going to determine. It's just like, you can tell me you practice all you want, but when game day comes, let's see how much you actually practice. And it's the same thing. Like, I can talk a big game, but when I get on the wrestling mat, it's going to show. And it's the same thing. The difference in sales and why sports and sales is not a good analogy is, if you think about military and sports, they're designed to do 2 things. You spend 90+% of your time practicing not to fail, practicing every possible way to end up winning. 10% of the time, maybe you're doing actually the work. You're on the field, you're playing the game, you're whatever. In sales, you spend 90% of the time on the mat with your competition. The other 10%, you're training. So it's an inverse relationship. And it's not about not failing. It's about helping other people solve problems. So you approach the sale as if it's their money and you got to go get it and you got to convince them to do something. I don't need to convince anybody to do anything. They're going to make their mind up. There's all kinds of human nature stuff that just says, look, a man convinces his own against his will is of the same opinion still. Ramrodding a solution down somebody's throat is not the way to get anything done. You have to.
Those preachy salesmen.
Yeah, the Grant Cardones, the Jordan Belforts. In B2C sales, there is a high pressure element because it's their money. You've got to manipulate. That's the way they approach it. Fine. Okay. That's not the way I teach selling. The way we teach selling, especially in business, is no business, no person is going to do anything that's against their own self-interest. Even if their self-interest is below other people's. So if you take a subservient attitude, which is what we're taught to do in the military, it's the only way this military works, is we have to take an inferior posture. Otherwise, I can never submit myself to a chain of command. So when we go into sales, I can't take an inferior posture, but it's not my job to take a superior posture. It's just my job to understand that other people, humans, act in their own self-interest. And if I understand that, and I understand that sales is really about helping people get things done, then every person will buy not what a product does, but what the product does for them. And so your job as a salesperson is to help uncover what that need is so that you can help solve it. And then your job as a business salesperson, professional business salesperson, is to make sure that people's individual desires and drives don't conflict with the business self-interest. Because in business, you will have the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And what will end up happening is one person on a team of 5 that's making a decision will make a decision to do something that's not in the best interest of the company, but it's in their personal best interest. And that's what you're competing with, is that it's human nature. People are trying to do what's in their best interest. If there's $100,000 available for training, and that's across sales, marketing, and IT, every one of those sales leaders wants that $100,000 for their team. What might be best for the company is to get $100,000 worth of sales training. But the IT person has a closer relationship with the CEO, and they will make their pitch that they need that money, even though it will hurt the business. You're going to have to go against the self-interest of the IT person, help that person make their interests subservient to the needs of the whole, if you're going to win that sale. That's the difference between business selling and personal selling.
I see. Okay.
And most people never learn that. They think that sales is, oh, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to learn some clever saying. Then I'm going to do this, or I'm going to learn a technique. And all those things are useful. You have to understand human psychology to sell, but that's not the way businesses make decisions. And your idea of what you can do, what you have to do is get the collective group, and you have to identify every person who has an influence in that group in order to help them make a better decision. And in that way, the correlation between the military and the civilian world starts to become crystal clear. Because in that way, what you start to understand is it's just like going into a village in Afghanistan or anywhere else that you're at in a foreign country, and you've got a tribal leader, and you've got elders, and you've got people that you've got to convince. And how are you going to convince that entire group that what's in their self-interest is what's important, so that one jihadist, one person doesn't come over and take the whole thing? So we already know about that. We've already been trained for that situation in the military, whether it's that or a guard who's doing guard duty as a private first class on a military base. They've got to learn how to challenge a major coming in without ID wearing a uniform. It's like, I don't care if you're wearing a uniform or not. You could have picked that up at the, dry cleaners. You're going to stay there until I get, confirmation of who you are, sir. They got to learn how to do that. So we know it already, but we did it with a significant emotional event. If we screw up, people could die. If they screw up in sales, who cares? I'll just go across the street and get another job and lie on my resume, right? So we already know it, but we've got to learn how to go from inferior posture to our own self-interest, and then learning that people make decisions based not upon logic, but become emotion. And you've got to make that emotion. You have to be, your sale is pitching the company's best interest, and your product just happens to be the thing that does that. If you go in and try to pitch your product, you're going to have a harder time. And I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying you can't succeed that way. But my job as a sales coach, as a sales manager, as a sales leader, is not to teach you how to swindle people or to get their money. My job is to help you learn how to navigate the complex field of human decision making so that you can make better decisions for your organization to help other people make better decisions for theirs. Does that track or make sense?
That makes sense. Definitely crystal clear. I like the teaching method you guys have set in stone with this program too.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Well, that's, essentially that's what we're trying to do as we break and we do these groups and we're learning. There are techniques, there are tactics, there is selling frameworks and foundations. That is extremely important in what we do. But it's not the only thing we do, because they've got to understand what it's really like to go out and sell. And there's a lot of good programs out there that teach the fundamentals of sales language. But where they fall short is they don't have 12 weeks of instructionally designed material that's led by somebody like myself who has 25 years of experience failing and learning how to do it and what works and doesn't work. And then learning what tools are useful and not being over-reliant on those tools so that they can graduate and hit the ground running in sales executive positions. And that's totally different than watching an online class, which are really designed for continuing education, or a cohort that says we're going to turn you into a business development rep, which is not the goal of our program. Business development reps essentially are marketing reps that take inbound leads and then convert them to an appointment. We teach that, but we teach that fundamentally in week one. We build on that knowledge that they're truly doing the hardest part of selling that's there, which is creating cold relationships, turning them warm, getting appointments, learning how to build a territory, learning what it means to turn the tip, learning all those things that we talked about, and then learning fundamentally what sales is. So that when they show up, like our graduates have done to the organizations that they show up, they don't say, oh yeah, well, we came from the military, we got a lot to do. They go, where did you don't have sales experience? You've never been in sales before? I mean, Jared, you had an example like that, right? You were talking to somebody and they were like, how long have you been in sales? What was that one with the lady?
I don't remember all the details of that one specifically, yeah, but it was pretty much, how many years have you been doing this?
Oh, really?
Yeah, you were networking. You just met some lady and I forgot what she was. She was pretty important, but she was like in marketing and you guys were talking and she was like, oh, so how many years have you been in sales now? And you were like,
a couple weeks.
5 months, 8 weeks. I don't know. Like, but it's not because I'm the whiz bang all. It's like, this is what every sales manager, director, VP of sales who's been in the industry for 20, 25 years and really been a student of it knows. But most of them don't stop their careers at 40 years old and say, 45 years old, like I did, and say, oh, I'm going to step away from my career and go ahead and, start a company and spend all my life savings to get, teach military people how to sell. They're too busy making mid-six figures and they're setting up their retirement. Me, I'm lucky. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. So it was like, what do I want to do? What's going to help me self-actualize? I wanted to help train and teach more people. And that's why I started Sales Platoon.
Okay. No, like I said, I really like the mission that you guys have, and seeing that you guys are helping other veterans on the transition out. I think that's awesome. I think for even me personally, it would be cool to partake in this course as well. But I'm excited for our interview on Sunday. I think we have a lot of great information to share with our audience, and I can't wait for them to hear about your program and company.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
Right.